I'm Alyssa Carter, 22 years old, and for most of my life, I believed family meant unwavering support, that no matter how hard life got, your parents would stand by you, especially when you did everything right. For 18 years, I was the model daughter. Straight A's, volunteer hours, perfect attendance, even a letter of recommendation from our town mayor. I was the one they bragged about at reunions, the future neurosurgeon from Willow Creek, Texas. But that belief shattered one warm summer night. If you've ever had to fight for your future when the people closest to you gave up on you, leave a comment and tell me your story. And if this resonates, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. You might help someone else find the strength to walk away when silence is the only answer left. I still remember the way my mom's voice sounded that evening, calm but cold. "We've gone over the numbers again," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "And we just can't afford your tuition to Emory." I blinked at her, waiting for the "but we'll figure it out." It never came. 2 weeks later, I stood in the driveway with our extended family as my dad handed my younger brother Logan the keys to a brand new Silverado, glossy red paint, oversized bow, custom license plate that said Log Z. "For your future," Dad said proudly, ruffling his hair. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just watched them cheer while my world quietly collapsed. That moment marked the turning point, when I realized the people who taught me to dream big had never planned to fund those dreams unless they came in the shape of a son. Looking back, the signs were always there. Subtle but stacked like bricks behind a wall, I refused to question. We lived in a modest ranch house off Highway 17, small but always tidy, like our family image. My dad, Thomas Carter, had worked at the county water department for over 2 decades. My mom, Renee, part-timed at the school district office. Every penny, every decision, we were told, was carefully planned for my education. "You'll be the first doctor in the family," Dad used to say, his voice full of pride. "We're setting everything aside for your future." Every time I asked for the things other girls had, concerts, new clothes, spring break trips, Mom would give me that soft smile and say, "College comes first, Alyssa, always." And I believed her, every single time. Logan was 3 years younger, all charm and chaos. While I stayed up reviewing biology flashcards, he was usually outside rebuilding lawnmowers or driving around back roads with his friends. He never liked school much, but Dad loved his hands-on instincts. "The boy's a natural," he'd say, watching Logan grease up in the garage. I didn't mind. We were close. I helped him pass history. He made sure no one messed with me at school. "There's balance in the two of you," Mom often said. "Alyssa with her books, Logan with his grit." So I never saw it coming. I thought we were equal. I thought love meant fairness. But the moment they chose a $50,000 truck over a 4-year future I had built with sweat, sacrifice, and certainty, I understood. Fairness had conditions, love had limits, and I would never look at my family the same way again. That night, the night of the truck, I barely slept. I lay in my bed in our little house off Highway 17, the Silverado's red gleam still burning behind my eyelids. From the second floor, I could hear the soft hum of celebration lingering downstairs, plates being washed, laughter from my parents, Logan retelling his surprise for the 5th time. Meanwhile, I was frozen in my room, trying to reconcile what had just happened with everything I had once believed. But the truth wasn't born that night. It had been living quietly in the background all along. Willow Creek is the kind of town where people remember your kindergarten teacher, your Little League stats, and your family's lawnmower brand. Just under 9,000 people, 2 stoplights, and 1 high school, Willow Creek High, where I spent 4 years doing everything I could to build the future my parents said they wanted for me. I wasn't born gifted. I worked hard. Late nights at the kitchen table with textbooks stacked like bricks. Early mornings reviewing formulas in the car while Mom drove me to student council meetings. Weekends volunteering at the town clinic while my friends went to the lake. But every sacrifice had a purpose. Every no to a party or sleepover felt like a yes to my dreams. "Just a few more years, sweetheart," Dad would say. "Then it'll all be worth it." My teachers noticed me early on. By third grade, I was reading Shakespeare while my classmates struggled with punctuation. In middle school, they bumped me ahead in math, and by high school, I was taking dual-credit college courses at the community college across town. I was the Carter girl, the smart one, the future doctor. People expected great things, and I intended to deliver. Logan, on the other hand, took a different path. Always more comfortable under the hood of a truck than behind a desk, he barely scraped by in school, but had a magnetic confidence that drew people in. Coaches loved him, neighbors adored him, and Dad practically beamed every time Logan mentioned tools or engines. He was the kind of kid who'd get a C in biology, then fix the lawnmower the same day and get praised more for that than I did for acing my calculus midterm. But we were never in competition. At least, I didn't think so. We had different strengths, different futures, or so I thought. We were close. He'd bring me coffee during study marathons. I'd sneak him answers on Spanish homework. He once punched a guy for calling me stuck-up. I never forgot that. So no, I didn't resent Logan. I never did. Until I realized he wasn't just being supported, he was being prioritized. The signs were there, scattered throughout the years like puzzle pieces I didn't want to connect. Dad spent weekends teaching him how to change brake pads while I cleaned the kitchen. Mom would rave about Logan's charm to neighbors, while downplaying my academic awards as just Alyssa being Alyssa. When Logan failed geometry, Dad called it finding his own path. When I got an A- in physics, they asked what went wrong. But I still believed their love was equal. I still believed that come college, all of this would balance out, that they'd show up for me the way I'd shown up for them. That belief held me together through high school, until it didn't. Until the truth revealed itself, not in a fight or a confession, but in the roar of a Silverado engine and a bow tied like a gift-wrapped betrayal. I used to think that doing everything right guaranteed something in return, but I was wrong. Sometimes the ones who give the most are the easiest to forget. By the time senior year rolled around, everything felt like it was finally falling into place. I'd done the hard part, kept the grades up, built a glowing resume, earned the respect of my teachers, and gathered more extracurriculars than would fit on one college application. From the outside, it looked like I was on a one-way track to success. And from the inside, it felt like I was flying. College became a dinner table conversation almost every night. Emory, Vanderbilt, Tulane, every school with a competitive pre-med program made its way into our family planning sessions. Mom even created a color-coded spreadsheet that lived on the kitchen corkboard, with columns for tuition costs, deadlines, scholarships, and travel distance. "I've been saving since you were in diapers," she'd say, tapping a box on the sheet. "We'll fill in the gaps with scholarships and a small loan if we need to. This is what we've prepared for." Dad would nod and repeat his usual line. "Nothing's more important than setting you kids up right. Logan's got his hands, and you've got your brain. Different tools, same goal." The only thing more exhilarating than getting those acceptance letters was the way my parents reacted when I opened them. The night I opened my Emory acceptance, it was pouring outside. Warm Texas rain drumming against the windows. I remember standing by the front door, soaked from a run to the mailbox, envelope trembling in my hands. Thick envelope. That's always a good sign. I ripped it open, read the first line, and screamed. Within seconds, Mom and Dad came running. Logan poked his head out from the garage. I read the letter aloud, barely making it through. "We're thrilled to offer you admission to Emory University with a partial merit scholarship." Dad hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. "We're going out," he declared. "Sal's Steakhouse. You've earned it." That place was our town's version of five-star dining. White tablecloths, candlelight, and a dessert menu with no prices. That night at Sal's, they toasted with sparkling cider. Even Logan, who never liked fancy food, raised his glass. "To our future doctor," Dad said, his voice thick with pride. "We always knew you'd get there." And I believed it. Believed every word they said. That they were proud. That they were ready. That the sacrifices I'd made were about to bloom into something real. In the weeks that followed, everything moved fast. I finalized my fall class schedule, picked a dorm, joined a private chat for incoming Emory pre-meds. Mom and I shopped for bedding and storage cubes. Dad ordered a new laptop as a surprise. Even Logan started referring to my move as when she heads to Atlanta. Every single sign told me my dream was becoming real, and I clung to that belief, tightly. Because when someone tells you, over and over, that you're worth investing in, you don't imagine a day when they'll change their minds. Summer in Willow Creek was always humid, always loud with cicadas, and always full of routine. But that summer, right after graduation, it felt different. Uneasy. It started small. Quiet things. Conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. Bills suddenly getting more attention than usual. Dad sighing more at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples. Mom scanning grocery receipts like each dollar was a personal insult. But I brushed it all off. We were preparing for a big move, after all. I told myself stress was normal. Transition was messy. Besides, they said everything was fine. And I wanted so badly to believe them. One Sunday evening, the air in the house felt heavier than usual. Logan was out at a bonfire with friends, and I was helping Mom prep dinner. Dad stepped in from the backyard and wiped his hands on a dish towel. "Can we sit down?" he asked, nodding toward the dining table. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. I sat, hands folded in my lap, trying to ignore the rising chill in the middle of June. He didn't drag it out. "Alyssa, your mom and I have been looking at the numbers again, and Emory might not be possible after all." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. The solution. But here's what we can do. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. She kept fiddling with her glass of water, her wedding ring spinning endlessly around her finger. "What do you mean?" I asked, voice low. "We planned for this. For years." Dad exhaled slowly. "Some of our investments didn't perform like we hoped. And with prices going up, we just don't have the extra cushion we thought we did." "We still support your education," Mom added, finally speaking. "Just maybe a local college first, save money, then transfer later." I felt like the floor had shifted underneath me. "You told me we had savings. You said a small loan would cover the rest. You said this was the plan." Dad gave a pained smile. "Life throws curveballs, kiddo." That night, I didn't eat. I sat on my bed surrounded by Emory brochures and orientation forms, trying to breathe through the panic. I replayed every conversation from the past year. Every "we've got you," every "we're proud of you," every dinner toast to my future. And now I was supposed to shrink my dream to fit their new reality. The next few days became a haze of calculations and pleading. I researched every last-minute scholarship still open. I worked out part-time job options, calculated student loan limits, even offered to defer a semester while I saved up. Each proposal I brought to the dinner table was met with a look of sympathy, and another no. "Let's be realistic," Dad said. "We just don't want you to start life buried in debt." "But you were okay spending money on my dream until now," I said, voice cracking. Their silence said everything. That was the first time I realized something deeper was at play. This wasn't just about money, it was about priorities, shifting ones I hadn't been told about, yet. I wanted to believe them. I clung to every excuse, every explanation they gave me like a life raft, because if I let myself truly question what was happening, I was afraid of what I might find. But doubts have a way of growing, even in the quietest corners of your mind. And once they start, it's hard to silence them. It started with the receipts. A week after the family meeting, I noticed a large box in the trunk of Mom's car. New patio furniture. She waved it off with a smile. "Clearance sale," Couldn't pass it up. Then came the weekend trip. Dad mentioned a fishing getaway with coworkers in Austin, 3 days, hotel included. A work thing, he said. Then the final straw. Our family vacation to Lake Travis still circled in red on the calendar. Booked, paid, not canceled. But my tuition? That, somehow, was too much. I tried to tell myself it was just poor budgeting, that people sometimes made contradictory financial choices, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. One afternoon, while looking for a stapler in Dad's home office, I saw something I wasn't meant to. A stack of bank statements. I wasn't snooping, not at first, but one page slid out, and a large number jumped out, $63,400 in a savings account. Not an empty account, not wiped out by emergency bills. That number followed me all the way back to my room. I stared at the ceiling that night, questions circling my mind like buzzards. If they still had money, why couldn't they help? Logan returned late that evening, bursting through the door like always, whistling as he raided the fridge. I asked where he'd been. "Garage with Drew," he said casually. "Dad's helping me get things ready for after graduation." "Like what?" He shrugged. "Just stuff. It's a surprise." That word, surprise, stuck with me. A few nights later, I passed by my parents' bedroom door and heard them arguing in hushed tones. I froze. "We should just tell her," Mom whispered, voice tight. "And say what exactly?" Dad snapped back. "You know this is the right choice. It's what's best for the family." "She's going to find out, Tom. She'll adjust. She always does." Their voices faded, and I backed away, heart pounding. I didn't know exactly what they were hiding, yet, but I knew then the money wasn't gone. It had just been reassigned. From that moment, I couldn't unsee the cracks. Mom humming while planting flowers in her brand-new garden chairs. Dad laughing on the phone with Uncle Rob about timing everything just right. Logan's smug little smirk when I asked again what the surprise was. Something was coming. Something big. And whatever it was meant for him, not me. Logan's graduation day arrived on a blistering June afternoon, one of those Texas days where the heat clings to your skin like guilt. The high school gym was packed, folding chairs squeaking under proud parents, the air thick with cologne, perfume, and cheap celebratory flowers. I sat between Mom and Dad in the third row, our last names stitched neatly into a seat sign. Carter family, honors graduate. Even that felt like a lie. Logan had barely scraped a 3.0 GPA. His honor came from captaining the wrestling team and showing up on time. But today, he was the golden boy. When his name was called, the gym erupted. Mom jumped up, clapping like a cheerleader. Dad whistled, loud, sharp, the kind of whistle he never gave me. Not even when I was valedictorian. I stood, clapping politely. But inside, I was hollow. Not angry, not yet, just waiting. After the ceremony, we gathered outside beneath a sprawling oak tree, where Mom had instructed the whole extended family to meet for photos. Aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in years came in for hugs. Grandpa Carter flew in from Tampa. Everyone was here, for Logan. I posed for pictures with him, smiling through clenched teeth, pretending I belonged in the moment. But Dad kept checking his watch. Mom kept exchanging glances with Uncle Rob, and I could feel it coming. "All right, everyone," Dad called out. "Follow us to the parking lot. We've got a little surprise." The words hit me like a cold slap. I knew, but I still followed, foolishly hoping it wouldn't be what I thought. We rounded the corner of the school lot, where a small crowd had begun to gather near a gleaming black Chevy Silverado, massive, spotless, with a red bow the size of a beach ball tied to its hood. I stopped walking. Dad held up a key fob with the Chevy logo, his face beaming. "Logan, son, this is yours. For your next chapter. You've made us so proud." The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, even a few whistles. Logan's mouth fell open. "Are you serious?" he gasped. Mom was already crying. "Of course, baby. You earned this." I stood still, a stone in the middle of a rushing stream of celebration. That truck, it couldn't have cost less than $50,000. $50,000. 2 weeks ago, they told me they couldn't afford $20,000 for Emery. But for Logan? They pulled out all the stops. Full-blown surprise. Custom plates. A coordinated reveal with guests, cameras, even a graduation cake shaped like a truck waiting back at the house. This wasn't spontaneous. This had been planned. Uncle Rob clapped Dad on the back. "You outdid yourself, Tom. A truck like that'll set him up right." Dad grinned, throwing an arm around Logan. "He's going into the trades. He needs reliable wheels. This isn't just a gift. It's an investment in his future." Logan climbed into the driver's seat, already fiddling with the dashboard like a kid on Christmas morning, and no one, not one person, noticed me standing 10 feet away, silent, stunned, erased. Except Grandma June. She glanced my way for a second, then quickly looked away. The ride home was unbearable. In the back seat, I stared out the window while my parents laughed about Logan's reaction. Mom kept saying, "Did you see his face? It was perfect." Perfect. That was the word she used while my future had been left in ashes. And in that moment, something inside me broke, not loud or dramatic, but quiet, permanent. They hadn't just chosen Logan's path over mine. They'd chosen him. The party stretched into the evening. Streamers, pulled pork sliders, a playlist full of Logan's favorites thumping in the background. Everyone was still talking about the truck, gathered in little clusters, admiring its chrome, its tires, its future. I stayed mostly quiet, present in body, but hollow inside. By the time the last guest left and the backyard emptied, my hands were still trembling from everything I hadn't said, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. I found them in the kitchen, casually rinsing dishes like nothing had happened. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. "Of course, honey," Mom replied, drying her hands with a towel. "Wasn't today amazing?" I blinked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The truck, it must have cost at least $50,000. Dad turned sharply, his shoulders straightened. "We got a good deal. Bob at the dealership gave us an employee discount." "That's not the point," I said, louder than intended. 2 weeks ago, you told me you couldn't afford $20,000 a year for college. Now you buy Logan a brand new truck? Make it make sense." Mom sighed. "It's not the same thing, Alyssa." "Why not?" "This was a one-time purchase," she said softly. "College is ongoing, 4 years, maybe more, and that doesn't include med school." Dad chimed in, trying to sound rational. "Medical school is a risky investment. 8 years of debt and no guarantees. Construction's practical. Logan can start working immediately. He'll earn while you're still in class." My heart thudded. "So it's about return on investment?" They didn't answer. "You told me I'd be the first doctor in the family. You promised you were saving for this." Mom placed a hand on my arm, and I pulled away before she could speak. "Sometimes girls get big dreams," she said gently. "But life takes turns. You could meet someone in college, start a family. Are you serious right now?" I stared at her, stunned. "You think I've worked my entire life for this just to drop out and get married?" "That's not what she meant," Dad snapped. "But Logan is following in my footsteps. This is legacy, Alyssa. Mitchell men have always worked with their hands." Legacy. There it was, the unspoken truth. The reason everything felt uneven from the start. This wasn't about finances. It wasn't about risk. It was about gender, about tradition, about choosing the son, the heir, the name that stays. "I see," I said, quieter now. "So if I were a boy, this would be different." Dad's face reddened. "Don't twist this. This isn't about gender." But neither of them could meet my eyes. The silence stretched like glass between us, clear, fragile, one word away from shattering. "I'm done," I finally said. "Done pretending this is okay. Done letting you gaslight me into believing this was out of your control." I turned away, heart pounding in my throat. As I climbed the stairs back to my room, I could still hear them in the kitchen. Whispers, dishes clinking, the quiet sound of a family breaking open from the inside. Behind my bedroom door, I collapsed to the floor, pressing my hands to my mouth as the sobs finally came, raw and uncontrollable. Not just grief, but rage. Grief for what I'd lost. Rage for how easily they let it go. That night, the laughter downstairs faded, but the damage didn't. Because once trust is broken in silence, rebuilding it with words feels impossible. Sleep didn't come that night. Even after the house quieted, after the last faucet stopped dripping, after the lights dimmed and the celebration turned to shadows, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. I didn't cry again. I didn't yell. Something colder had taken over now. I needed the truth, the full truth. At 3 a.m., I climbed out of bed and turned on my laptop. There had to be something, some evidence that this decision wasn't last minute, that the financial emergency they'd described was nothing more than carefully rehearsed theater. I started with our shared family email account, the one we'd used for years for utility bills, appointment confirmations, and household reminders. My name was still attached to it for school notifications. It only took 2 searches: Logan, truck. And there it was, an email chain between Dad and a dealership in San Marcos, dating back 4 months. Price negotiations, loan pre-approvals, package upgrades, color options, an attachment titled Finalized Finance Terms, Chevy Silverado LTZ. I scrolled through the emails, mouth dry, heart pounding. Every message was time-stamped during the exact weeks I'd been finalizing my college documents and asking them about money. And then, one message from Mom to Dad, dated exactly 8 days before they sat me down to deliver their heartbreaking news. Truck will be ready for Logan's graduation. Dealership says they'll hide it behind the service garage until pickup day. Should we break the Emory news to Alyssa before or after? I'm worried about her reaction. I sat back in my chair, the screen casting a bluish glow across my bedroom walls. My hands were shaking. It had never been about money. It had been about a choice, a deliberate, conscious, prioritized choice. I wasn't just forgotten, I was sacrificed. Fueled by something between fury and focus, I opened a few more folders. Dad's financial backups, poorly hidden in a desktop folder titled Tom Docs, with his birthday as the password. Inside were PDFs, statements, investment logs. The savings account I'd stumbled upon weeks earlier? Just one of 3. They had money. Not millions, but enough. Enough to send both kids down different paths, if they'd wanted to. But they didn't. When the sun finally peeked through the blinds, I hadn't slept. I hadn't moved from my desk, just sat there, staring at the pieces of a future they'd shattered in silence while planning a celebration for someone else. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was documented, labeled, budgeted. And now I knew, without a shred of doubt, they hadn't run out of resources. They'd just run out of reasons to give them to me. I didn't expect a knock on my bedroom door. Not that morning, not after what I'd just uncovered. I hadn't even changed out of the oversized Emory t-shirt I slept in. My laptop was still open, emails and financial records glaring on the screen like wounds. The knock came again. Then a voice. "Hey, it's me. Logan." I didn't answer, but I didn't tell him to go away either. After a pause, the door creaked open and he stood there, still in pajama pants, hair a mess, trying to look casual. "Can I come in?" I nodded once, tight-lipped. He sat down on the edge of the bed like it was any other day, like nothing had exploded between us. "About the truck," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know it seems unfair." "Seems?" I asked flatly. He let out a long breath. Dad's been talking about getting me set up for a while. Since I said I wanted to do construction, he started calling in favors, lining up apprenticeships with his buddies. The truck's part of that, you know, for hauling tools and stuff. I stared at him. And medical school isn't worth a similar investment? He shrugged. It's different. Dad says doctor stuff is all loans anyway. And, eventually you'll get married, right? Your husband will help with things. That sentence. It hit harder than anything he could have said. It wasn't just Mom and Dad who saw me as temporary, as a phase. It was Logan, too. It's not just about the truck, Logan, I said quietly. It's about what it represents, about the fact that no one thought I was worth that kind of faith. He looked uncomfortable. It's not like that. Dad thinks this is practical. He says construction is reliable. He even mentioned helping with a down payment on a house later. Building equity, you know? A house, I repeated. After telling me we couldn't afford college, they're going to help you buy a house. Maybe not right away, he said defensively. You know how Dad is. Once he gets an idea. Do you think any of this is fair? I asked. He paused. I don't know, he said finally. Life's not always fair. We're just on different paths. Yours is academic. Mine's hands-on. Dad's just investing accordingly. I stared at him. This brother I had helped through every science project, every late-night cram session, every essay he couldn't finish. I had protected him, covered for him, sacrificed for him. And now he sat in my room, parroting our father's logic like it made perfect sense to buy him a truck and offer him a house while telling me to shrink my future. We're not cool, Logan, I said. He looked up, startled. I know you came in here to check that everything's fine, that I'm fine, but I'm not. Not with you. Not with any of this. He nodded slowly, stood up, and walked out without another word. When the door clicked shut behind him, I didn't cry. I just sat there, still, breathless, anchored in the truth that had become impossible to unsee. It wasn't that I had failed them. It was that I had been trained my whole life to believe I had to earn something that was never meant to be mine in the first place. By the time I came downstairs the next morning, I had made up my mind. No more polite questions. No more hinting or hoping. I wanted answers. Dad was at the table with the morning paper, pretending to read. Mom stood by the stove, flipping pancakes like it was any other Sunday. Logan was nowhere to be seen. Can we talk? I asked, my voice clear, calm. Dad didn't look up. Of course. I set my phone on the table and turned the screen toward them, open to the email chain I'd found the night before. The subject line read, Truck, final pickup details. The date, 4 months ago. Mom froze, the spatula still in her hand. Dad slowly folded his paper. You've been planning Logan's truck for months, I said. Before you ever told me you couldn't afford my tuition. Dad's voice dropped an octave. You went through our emails? Our shared family account, I replied. The one I've used for years. The one where you discussed which lie to tell me and when. Mom sank into a chair, suddenly quiet. Alyssa, she said gently. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, I said. You chose Logan. You lied about the money. You lied about the reasons. Dad slammed his hand on the table, dishes rattling. That's enough. We made a parental decision about how to allocate our family's resources. We don't owe you a justification. Actually, you do, I said, voice still steady. You raised me to believe that education mattered, that my work ethic would be rewarded, that promises meant something. You helped me apply to Emory knowing you had no intention of helping me go. We support your goals, Mom whispered. Just not at a school that expensive when there are other options. This isn't about public versus private, I said. It's about the fact that you spent $50,000 on a truck for Logan and claimed you couldn't spare $20,000 for me. Dad leaned forward. That truck is for work. He's entering a trade. He needs it. For a job he hasn't even started? I said. Well, I've spent years proving myself, and you still said no? I paused, then added more quietly. You have the money. I saw the bank statements. You just didn't want to spend it on me. The kitchen went silent. Jason's chair remained empty. Mom stared at her lap. Dad's jaw worked for a moment before he finally said, "Since when do children dictate how parents spend money?" "Since you taught me to believe I mattered," I replied, "and then punished me for actually believing it." He pushed his chair back with a loud scrape. "I'm not having this conversation." But Mom reached out. "Tom," she said softly, "tell her." "Tell me what?" Her eyes were glassy now. "She deserves to know why we made this decision." Dad sighed like he'd been holding the truth in his lungs for years. "The truth is, investing in a son makes more sense," he said. "Logan will carry on the Carter name. His success stays in the family. Yours doesn't." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "So that's it," I whispered. "You never saw me as part of the legacy." "It's not personal," he added quickly. "It's practical. Traditional values have kept families strong for generations." I looked at Mom, silently begging her to disagree, to stand up, to see me, but she just nodded. "I know it sounds old-fashioned," she said, voice breaking, "but we had to think long-term." And just like that, it was done. Not just the financial betrayal, not just the broken promises, but the truth that I had spent my whole life auditioning for a place in a family that would never see me as equal, not because of who I was, but because of what I was. After that conversation, something inside me just shut off. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't slam doors or throw accusations. I simply stopped expecting anything from them. And when expectations die, so does the illusion of belonging. That night, I listened to the muffled sounds of dinner through the floorboards, plates clinking, casual conversation, Logan laughing about something on his phone. Life went on for them, just like that. But I couldn't unhear the truth, that I was an investment they had no interest in maintaining, that my ambition, once nurtured like a family heirloom, was now considered an expense they couldn't justify. So I did the only thing I could do. I opened my laptop and started planning my exit. First, I searched for scholarships that were still open, even the obscure ones with narrow eligibility or last-minute deadlines. One stood out: the Edmonds Foundation Scholarship for Resilient Scholars. Full ride, tuition, housing, books, and a stipend. 5 recipients nationwide, highly competitive. But one line stopped me. Awarded to students who demonstrate academic excellence and perseverance in the face of extreme personal obstacles. That was me. That was exactly me. The application required an essay, 3 letters of recommendation, financial documentation, and a video interview, submitted within the next 2 weeks. I didn't hesitate. I typed an email to Mrs. Bradford, my guidance counselor at Willow Creek High, even though it was already past midnight. "Mrs. Bradford, something unexpected has happened. My parents have withdrawn all financial support for Emory. I need help applying for emergency scholarship opportunities. Are you available tomorrow morning? Please, I'm not giving up. Alyssa Carter." At first light, I packed my backpack and slipped out of the house before anyone else woke up. I didn't leave a note. Didn't say goodbye. I just left. The only place that felt safe was Willow Creek Coffee and Books, the one with free Wi-Fi and bottomless refills if you smiled at the owner. I checked my phone, half dreading what I might find. No missed calls, no texts, just silence. A different kind of confirmation. Mrs. Bradford replied by 7:45 a.m. "I'm here all morning. Come to my office whenever you're ready. We'll figure this out." She didn't ask questions in her reply. Didn't offer pity, just a place to start. And somehow that steadiness meant more than any apology ever could. Returning to Willow Creek High felt like walking into a past life, one where I was still the girl they believed in. The halls were quiet. Summer break had cleared the campus of students, leaving only the soft buzz of office lights and the occasional hum of a printer. Mrs. Bradford's office was exactly how I remembered it. Stacks of college brochures, a faded diploma on the wall, a little potted fern named Henry in the window. But when she saw me standing there, exhausted, hollow-eyed, she didn't greet me with small talk. She just said, "Come in, Alyssa. Sit down. Tell me everything." I told her everything: the financial withdrawal, the emails, the truck, the conversation where my parents admitted that Logan, by virtue of being the son, was the one they'd chosen to invest in. She listened without interrupting. Her jaw tightened more than once. By the time I finished, her expression had shifted from concern to quiet outrage. "I've known your parents for years," she said softly. "I never imagined they would do this. But I'm glad you came to me." I nodded, too tired to respond with anything more. "Let's focus on what we can control," she continued. "The Edmonds scholarship is real. Competitive, yes, but if anyone has a shot—" She didn't finish the sentence. She just opened her laptop. Over the next several hours, we built my application like we were constructing a lifeboat. The essay came first, 1,000 words describing not just my accomplishments, but the obstacles I'd faced and how I intended to rise above them. Mrs. Bradford reminded me, "This isn't about pity, it's about resilience. Show them who you are without begging for sympathy." I wrote about late nights studying while my family watched TV, about declining party invites to focus on AP Bio, about smiling through the dinner where they toasted Logan's truck while quietly shelving my Emory enrollment packet. I wrote until my fingers cramped. Then came the recommendations. We reached out to Mr. Hale, my biology teacher, Coach Sanchez, who ran the volunteer program at the town clinic, and Mrs. Bradford herself. Each promised to send their letters by the end of the week. For financial documentation, we used what I had: screenshots of statements I'd found, FAFSA forms I'd filled out earlier, and a letter explaining the sudden loss of support. "They'll verify independently," she assured me. "What matters is that you tell the truth." By the time I left her office, the sun was starting to set. We weren't finished, not even close, but I no longer felt powerless. I wasn't waiting for my family to change anymore. I was changing everything without them. And that shift, subtle but seismic, was the first real breath of freedom I'd felt in weeks. Coming home that evening felt strange. Not tense, not loud, not even hostile. Just empty. Like I'd walked into someone else's house. The furniture hadn't changed. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon and lemon cleaner. Logan's muddy boots were still by the back door, but something was missing. Me. We didn't speak that night. Not really. Mom left a plate of food outside my bedroom door like I was a ghost haunting the hallway. Dad passed me in the living room without a glance. Even Logan, who used to barge into my room without knocking, now avoided eye contact. It was like everyone knew I'd seen too much, and they had no idea what to do with the version of me that had stopped being quiet. In that silence, I worked. I spent the next 10 days writing, editing, rewriting, every spare second dedicated to the Edmonds Foundation application. Mrs. Bradford checked in daily with feedback. Mr. Hale emailed his recommendation early. Coach Sanchez dropped his off in person, standing at the front door like some reminder that the world outside this house still believed in me. I worked in corners of the house no one used: the sunroom, the garage, sometimes even the stairs. I wasn't hiding. I was protecting my momentum, because once you start building your own escape, distractions become sabotage. The only real conversations came from Mom. Little comments like, "Have you thought about community college again? We can help you with books if you stay in town. We still love you, you know." Each word felt like someone trying to patch a dam with Scotch tape, and I was too tired to pretend it was holding. Eventually, I just stopped answering. She noticed, but didn't push. Dad said nothing at all. Logan tried once. He knocked on my door and mumbled something about a movie downstairs. I didn't respond, not because I hated him, but because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't break both of us open. He left quietly, and that was that. I submitted my application on the 11th day, a 2,000-word essay, 3 glowing recommendations, all the required documentation, and in the comments box, I typed just one sentence. Thank you for considering me. This isn't just about education, it's about reclaiming the future I was told I couldn't have. When I hit send, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath underwater. Not relief, not quite hope, just oxygen. 3 days after I submitted my application, the email came. Subject line, Edmonds Foundation interview invitation time. Monday at 10 o'clock a.m. Format, virtual panel, 5 members. My hands trembled just reading it. I wasn't scared exactly, but when you've spent weeks clawing toward a future that felt like it was slipping away, moments like this feel sacred, like the world is finally listening. I texted Mrs. Bradford immediately. I got the interview. She replied almost instantly. My office is yours. Come in early. We'll run a tech check. You've got this. I hadn't told my parents about the scholarship, not because I wanted to be secretive, but because they'd forfeited the right to be part of this chapter the moment they decided I didn't deserve the last one. Monday morning came fast. I left before sunrise, dressed in the one blazer I owned, black, fitted, borrowed years ago for a debate competition. My stomach was in knots, but my steps felt sure. Mrs. Bradford greeted me with coffee and a smile. You ready? She asked. As ready as I'll ever be. We ran a quick tech check, camera angle, microphone clarity, lighting from her desk lamp. Then, right at 9:58, she gave me a reassuring nod and stepped out, closing the door behind her. The interview screen flickered to life. 5 boxes, 5 strangers, the scholarship director, 2 university officials, a private donor, and a past Edmonds recipient, now a med student at NYU. Each of them introduced themselves warmly. Then, without wasting time, they began. They asked about my academic record, my future goals, why medicine, why Emory, why now? Then they got harder. What's the greatest obstacle you've faced in the last year? How do you handle betrayal from those closest to you? What makes you different from the hundreds of students applying for this same award? I didn't flinch. I told them the truth, that my family had pulled financial support without warning, that I discovered the decision wasn't about hardship, but favoritism, that I had to fight for a future that was once promised to me freely. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't paint myself as a victim. I'm not asking for this scholarship because I've suffered more, I told them. I'm asking because I'll make the most of it, because I've already proven I'll fight for what matters, quietly, fiercely, and without shortcuts. They were quiet for a beat after that. Then one of the university reps smiled. That's the kind of answer we remember? The call ended 90 minutes after it began. I sat there for a moment, staring at the empty screen, heart pounding, not from nerves but from something deeper. That was mine. No one had helped me shape those words. No one had spoken on my behalf. It was just me. And it was enough. Waiting is its own kind of ache. Not loud, not sharp, just this constant hum beneath your skin, reminding you that something might be coming, or might not. That's where I lived for the next 7 days, between breath and silence, between hope and self-protection. I stayed out of the house as much as I could. The local library became my sanctuary, cold air, quiet corners, and the smell of old books that reminded me of who I used to be. I reread chapters from my biology textbook just to feel like the future was still within reach. Every morning, I checked my email before I got out of bed. Every night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the interview in my head. Every word, every pause, wondering if I'd said enough. No one in my house asked what I was doing, not even once. Mom kept leaving food at my door. Little offerings of guilt wrapped in foil, meatloaf, macaroni, blueberry muffins. I didn't throw them away, but I didn't eat most of them either. It wasn't about being petty. It was about clarity. You can't fix a broken window by decorating the curtains. You have to admit that the glass is shattered. And no one downstairs seemed willing to say the words out loud. Logan tried again, this time sliding a note under my door. I didn't ask for any of this. I wish things were different. I miss us. I stared at the paper for a long time. But what could I say? That I missed us too? That I didn't blame him, even though I kind of did? I folded the note, tucked it into the back of my journal, and left it there. Not as a rejection, just as a placeholder. Mrs. Bradford checked in on the 5th day. No news yet, I texted. That means you're still in the running, she replied. She always knew how to plant just enough hope without making it feel like a guarantee. By day 6, I was starting to unravel. It felt like the longer I waited, the more the past clawed its way back in. But instead of spiraling, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened my laptop, not for forms or essays, but to journal. I wrote about everything. About the night they told me no. About the morning I found the truck receipts. About the silence, the food trays, the note. And then I wrote something I didn't expect. I'm no longer waiting for them to say sorry. I'm just waiting to stop needing it. That sentence hit harder than anything else I'd written, because it was true. And it meant that no matter what happened next, I was already walking towards something better, even if it still felt miles away. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. No build-up, no dramatic music, just a quiet ding from my phone while I stood in line at the pharmacy, waiting to pick up shampoo and toothpaste. Subject line, Edmonds Foundation, final decision. I froze. The world kept moving, customers shuffling forward, fluorescent lights buzzing above, but my thumb hovered above the screen like touching it might shatter everything. I tapped it open, and there it was. Dear Alyssa Carter, congratulations. You have been selected as one of 5 recipients of the Edmonds Foundation Scholarship for Resilient Scholars. I read the email 3 times before I let myself believe it was real. Tuition, covered. Housing, covered. Books, supplies, meals, even a modest stipend, all covered. There was no catch, no condition, no quiet string that might be pulled away. It was mine. Tears sprang to my eyes before I could stop them. Right there between aisles of cough drops and candy bars, I pressed a hand to my mouth and exhaled. Not just relief, not just joy, validation. For every night I studied while my family watched Netflix. For every birthday I skipped celebrating because money was tight. For every time I swallowed disappointment and smiled anyway. This wasn't just about college. This was about finally being seen. I stepped outside, air sharp against my face, and called the only person who deserved to hear the news first. Mrs. Bradford answered on the first ring. "Did you check your email?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't even wait for me to finish. "You got it, didn't you?" "I got it," I whispered. "I actually got it." There was a pause. Then she exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for days, too. "I'm so proud of you, Alyssa. You earned every word of that email. Every bit of it." When I hung up, I didn't go home. I walked down to Willow Creek Coffee and Books, the same little cafe where this plan had been born. I ordered a vanilla latte and sat in the far corner, pulling out my journal. And there, between pages stained with frustration and fear, I wrote something new. They didn't believe in me, but I did, and that made all the difference. That night, I didn't say a word to my parents, not because I was keeping secrets, but because not every victory needs to be shared with the people who doubted you. Some wins belong to your younger self, the one who kept trying long before anyone clapped. Packing felt different this time, not rushed, not panicked, not some frantic scramble to chase after a life that might still slip through my fingers. It felt steady. Like I was finally walking toward something, on my terms. I pulled the suitcase from the back of my closet, the same one I'd used for college tours last year, before everything shifted, before the lies, before the silence. Only this time, I didn't pack out of hope. I packed from strength, each item folded with purpose, each decision deliberate. My favorite jeans, worn soft at the knees, the blue blazer I'd worn to the interview, my lucky Emery hoodie, still with the tag on, like part of me hadn't dared to believe until now. Mom hovered at the edge of the doorway. She didn't say much, just little comments here and there. "Do you need help with laundry? That suitcase might be too small. Will you text when you get there?" I nodded, smiled politely, answered only when necessary. I wasn't being cold. I wasn't trying to punish her. I just didn't have energy left to fix what she still hadn't acknowledged. Dad didn't come upstairs. He stayed in the garage most of the day, pretending to tinker with Logan's truck, though the engine didn't even need work. I didn't seek him out either. Some conversations are better left unsaid when both people have made peace with the silence. Logan, though, he knocked gently around dinner time. He stood in the doorway, hands shoved into his hoodie pocket, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to speak. "You're really leaving, huh?" I zipped up the side pocket of my suitcase before I answered. "Yeah, I am." He nodded slowly. "I guess I always knew you would." I didn't respond. "I mean," he added, "you were always the one who finished what she started." That made me pause. "I hope you're happy for me," I said finally. He looked up. "I am." And something in his voice told me he meant it. Not perfectly. Not without guilt. But genuinely. That night, I printed out my acceptance letter and taped it inside the suitcase lid. Not for anyone else, just for me. So that on days I doubted myself, or missed the version of home I never really had, I'd remember. I didn't just get in. I climbed through the cracks they tried to bury me under. The drive to Emory University was quiet. Mrs. Bradford offered to take me, said she had an old friend in Atlanta she could visit, but I knew the truth. She just didn't want me to arrive alone, and I didn't argue. As we pulled onto campus, the trees curved like a soft welcome. Sunlight spilled across the red brick walkways. Students laughed as they carried armfuls of bedding and coffee cups, and something about it all felt cinematic. Except this wasn't a movie. This was my life, finally mine. We parked near the freshman dorms. I stepped out, stretched my legs, and just stood there for a moment, taking it in. This place was beautiful, not just in how it looked, but in what it meant. It was mine, earned, not gifted, chosen, not given. Mrs. Bradford smiled as she opened the trunk. "Ready?" I nodded. "More than I thought I'd ever be." We carried my bags up 2 flights of stairs, past whiteboards filled with doodles and doors taped with welcome notes. My roommate hadn't arrived yet, so the room was still half empty, just a bed, a desk, and a window overlooking the quad. I took the bed by the window, set my journal on the desk, taped a photo of younger me, braces, hopeful eyes, high school science fair ribbon, above the pillow. Not because I missed that version of me, but because I wanted her to see how far we'd come. Before she left, Mrs. Bradford paused at the doorway. "I hope you know how proud I am of you." I swallowed hard. "I wouldn't be here without you." She smiled. "You would have found a way. I just made sure the door didn't close behind you." And then, with one final squeeze of my shoulder, she was gone. That night, I walked the campus alone. Past students sprawled on benches, past chalk messages that read, "You belong here," past buildings that buzzed with possibility. I sat on the stone steps of the library and opened my phone. There were 3 unread texts from home. One from Mom, one from Logan, and one from a number I didn't recognize but somehow knew was Dad. I didn't open any of them, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because I no longer needed permission to enjoy the life I built. I lifted my gaze to the sky, took a deep breath, and whispered to no one in particular, "I made it." Not just to Emory, but through the fire, through the silence, through the doubt. College orientation week was a blur of handshakes, name tags, awkward small talk, and overly enthusiastic icebreakers. And somehow, I loved it. No one here knew my past. No one cared about the truck or the scholarships or who got what back home. Here, I wasn't the girl who had to prove herself to people who never saw her. I was just Alyssa. And for the first time, that felt like enough. My roommate, Sophia, arrived 2 days later. She was from Colorado, talked fast, laughed louder, and brought 3 suitcases full of plants and Polaroids. She wasn't like me, and that was exactly what I needed. Sophia didn't ask about my family. She asked what my favorite book was, what kind of music I played when I cleaned, whether I liked peppermint tea or coffee at night, questions that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with possibility. We sat on the quad during orientation, surrounded by hundreds of students trying to figure out where they belonged. She nudged me and said, "You've got that look." What look? The kind of look people have when they've already fought a war and still showed up smiling. I blinked at her. She wasn't wrong. That weekend, I attended a campus panel on women in medicine. Doctors, residents, grad students, each one sharing stories of being overlooked, doubted, underestimated, and each one still there. I took notes until my hand cramped, but one sentence stuck more than anything else. You don't owe anyone your pain to justify your success. That night, I opened my laptop and finally read the messages from home. Mom had written, "Hope move-in went well. We miss you." Logan said, "Let me know if you want me to visit sometime. No pressure." Dad's was the shortest. "Good luck, Alyssa." No apologies, no ownership, no surprises. And yet, I didn't cry. Not this time. Because I realized something in that moment. They didn't need to change for me to heal. I typed one message, to all 3. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm settling in just fine. I'm focused on school right now, and I need space to grow. I hope you can respect that." I hit send, closed the laptop, and felt a peace I hadn't felt in months, not because they finally understood me, but because I finally understood myself. By mid-September, I had a routine: morning coffee in the student center, biology lecture in Hall B217, study group on Thursdays, evening walks beneath the oak trees that lined the science quad. There was comfort in the structure, in the predictability of it all. But there was also something deeper settling in, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safety, not in the physical sense, but emotional safety, the kind that lets you breathe without bracing, the kind that doesn't ask you to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. Dr. Ellis, my biology professor, called me out in the best way during office hours. "I read your essay," he said. "You don't just understand the science, you feel it. That's rare." I laughed, a little embarrassed. "It's how I make sense of things." He leaned back in his chair. "Don't lose that. The best doctors don't just treat symptoms, they translate pain." That stuck with me. I started to think that maybe I wasn't just here to prove something, maybe I was here to build something, to become someone, not to escape the past, but to grow past it. Sophia and I started hosting late-night study sessions in our dorm. It started with 2 people, then 5. By week 5, we had to move to the floor lounge. Some students came for flashcard drills, others came for quiet company, hot tea, or just a moment to feel less alone. And strangely, I became the anchor. The girl who once felt invisible at her own kitchen table now held space for others. One night, after everyone had left, Sophia said, "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're going to be the kind of doctor who listens even when people don't know how to speak." My throat caught. Because that, more than any title or award, was the kind of impact I wanted to leave behind. And yet, in the middle of all this newness, I didn't forget where I came from. I still had the journal with the truck receipt folded inside, still had the scholarship email pinned to my bulletin board, not as bitterness, but as reminders of what it cost me to get here and why I'll never let anyone write my story for me again. If you're still listening, thank you. Because this story, my story, was never just about getting into college or winning some scholarship. It was about learning how to walk away from people who claimed to love me, but only when I stayed small. There's a certain kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who were supposed to protect you, who looked you in the eye and said, "We can't," while handing everything you ever needed to someone else. But here's what I learned. You don't need their permission to rise, and you definitely don't need their guilt to keep you grounded. For years, I thought if I worked hard enough, loved them well enough, stayed quiet long enough, they'd see me. But visibility doesn't come from begging. It comes from boundaries, from choosing yourself even when no one else does. So if you're listening right now, maybe sitting in your car or walking home with earbuds in, wondering if it's selfish to want more, it's not. Wanting more isn't selfish. It's sacred. You're allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that settled. You're allowed to build a life that makes no sense to the people who didn't believe in you. And you're allowed to say no, without explanation, without apology. I used to think forgiveness meant letting people back in. Now I know it just means refusing to carry what they never took responsibility for. And peace? Peace isn't always soft. Sometimes it's fierce. It shows up when you stop explaining, stop proving, and start living like you already belong. Because you do. So, wherever you are in your story, starting over, standing up, walking away, just remember, you are not invisible. You never were. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't see clearly through their own comfort. But I see you. And if my story reminds you of yours, then maybe that's the beginning of something new. For both of us. If this story moved you in any way, please like, subscribe, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. There's power in being heard, and you never know who might need that permission to take their first step. This was Alyssa Carter's story, but maybe, just maybe, it's yours too.